The Berserker, the furious foehammer, the indomitable iron claw, the brawny bear of brawl. The Berserker is a straightforward tank with some cards that grant him a little more nuance. He has good crowd control, exceptional mobility and utility, and the highest HP pool in the game, which paired with his damage mitigation passive allows him to become very hard to kill by Act 3. He does have some drawbacks to consider though. For one, he's one of the lowest damage dealers on average without certain setups. He's largely limited to melee range, which further exacerbates his damage dealing deficiency. Although he can taunt, he lacks hard crowd control, which makes locking down heavy hitting enemies harder for him. Finally, although he does technically have the most HP, it's not such a significant amount that getting hit doesn't hurt. Before his passive ramps up to its second and especially third level, you don't necessarily want to be taking a bunch of hits, as your kit might suggest. Bard is a huge boon for the Berserker, since she can help him position for his damage spends and give him a bunch of buffs to make tanking less painful. I'd say you benefit more than any other character from her music notes. Pyro is an interesting case, since he can technically proc your passive, but you have to take 2 damage by walking over one of his fire tiles for it. This trade mathematically isn't worth it until your 2nd level of passive at least, and only if you're expecting to take 3 or more damage after that. Or you really need to deal the extra damage from your passive on an attack now. Ranger can provide vines to hasten you, and Arcanist can move you around, but those aren't necessarily what they want to be doing each turn. Oh, and everyone loves you tanking for them, especially Rogue, who hates losing his passive. For Act 1, I recommend Long Haul, Fling, and Bring It On. Bring It On is excellent for mobility, which makes it a must include, since you need to move a lot as Berserker. Fling might not seem so impressive, especially when you consider the Arcanist's Stargate, but you have to remember that Stargate is the best card in the game, so even a knockoff version is going to be strong in many situations. You won't want Fling for missions without pits or allies to chuck around, so in those instances, swap in Whirlwind. Bulwark seems like you'd want to take it, given the shields, but it's less reliable than Long Haul in terms of range, provides less utility, and ultimately doesn't provide as much damage, which is more important than shield on average. Bulwark sadly doesn't really have a use case once you get Long Haul. I know this core 3-card lineup lacks attack options, which seems weird, but trust me, the utility you bring will make up for it. For items, Shaleshank can pair nicely early with your Long Hauls exposed to proc those 2 extra damage immediately. Lady's Bag is better for that once you have access though. Dinglehopper remains very solid early. Hercules Horn can help you with positioning for attacks, although with your Act 1 skill cards, this is less important. And, of course, Lava Rocks are always decent. Go buy some Fate cards from the Oracle. You're looking for any strengthens or movement options for later. Retaliate, while a clunky mechanic, is technically damage that synergizes with your playstyle, so I don't hate running it in my Fate deck when there aren't better options. Beyond that, any effect is probably good, especially if it reduces damage. And of course, no negative 2s. In Act 1, Long Haul is your main damage source. Since it inflicts Exposed 2, try to use it earlier in the turn order to maximize your team's damage potential each round. Use the pole to yank enemies onto lava tiles or other inconvenient positions. Fling is a very solid utility card. While its displacement effect is outdistanced dramatically by the Arcanist's Stargate, the 4 movement on it can go a long way on missions with interactables, such as the tables during the fight in Sinclair's Tavern. Although the movement is the main sell to bring it on, the taunt can go a long way for damage mitigation on your team. Paired with a root effect against melees, it's functionally a stun, and the rider's shield effect while you're enraged is pretty solid. There's no way to sugarcoat this. You have an absolutely abysmal matchup against the Ogre Queen. All of your damage cards require you to stand directly next to her after your turn, which is exactly where she wants you to be. This is probably the one time I consider Bulwark a decent option. Because if you hit her, you're pretty definitely getting hit back, and she hits hard even for you. It's honestly not bad if you do some cleanup duties on the non-boss enemies round 1, since they're easier for you to handle. Despite this disadvantage, you're certainly not useless. I usually play to tank a hit or two for my squishier teammates and save my big spends for a killing blow near the end of the fight. In Act 2, you get some new cards, which you're largely going to ignore. If you'd like a more in-depth discussion of Hibernate and Grizzly Force, you can check out my tier list with the other Sunder Fellows, Rob and Comet, but they're fairly terrible cards. While Takedown is not a fantastic card, it is your best single target damage without hurting yourself at this point, so we'll add it as our 4th card. I prefer it over Whirlwind because it has the single target capability, which tends to come up more often than circular AoE. As to how we get both hits reliably without standing next to enemies at the end of a round, I'll get to that in a moment. On the missions where Fling isn't relevant, Whirlwind is still a good pickup. If you've watched my previous guides, these trinkets will probably seem familiar. Lava Rock Statue is good damage, especially to pump up your roar. It's honestly not a bad idea to bring 2 of them on a mission just for a massive roar damage nuke. Volcanic Shell is an especially good option for the Berserker who otherwise lacks ranged damage. Movement options like Elephant's Draft, which itself is essentially an upgraded Hercules Horn, or Black Inkwell remain fine choices. I wouldn't recommend a healing trinket on Berserker personally. He should have enough damage mitigation to not need it, whereas he really needs the extra damage and movement options. The reason I am comfortable recommending bringing Takedown on Berserker is because of his favorite weapon, Tusk Charger. In a 4-player party, this is extremely easy to energize consistently, and the amount of repositioning options it provides you is huge. Charge isn't phenomenal, but you can almost always guarantee you're going to end up next to an enemy at the start of your turn. The 1 damage isn't bad, especially because it's amplified by your Rage passive's damage bonus, and strengthens, meaning it's often a +3 or better. Although you can still take movement options for trinkets, Tusk Charger also gives you the flexibility to pack better damage with trinkets instead, which is invaluable. There really is no reason you shouldn't take this weapon in Act 2, nobody else needs it as badly, even the rogue. For your fate cards, blues are pretty standard. You get +2s now, so use those. For blacks, I like the throw 3 since it lets you do some significant repositioning of enemies or allies. Damage 1, all adjacent monsters is fine too, as are retaliates, although shields aren't bad either. I tend to like gambling with random buffs if there aren't clearly strong guaranteed buff options like strengthen, but you'll be fine as long as you're not running -2s. Also, please make sure you aren't running any cards that provoke at greater than range 1. This can cause you to take way more aggro than you're expecting, and even in Act 2, I don't feel like you're adequately equipped to be eating every hit on Shadowstone. Takedown is your new bread and butter. Do everything you can via Tusk Charger, ally swaps, or other movement options to start your turn adjacent to an enemy. If that doesn't work out, Long Haul remains a solid flex. Fling still has some very potent uses on certain pit-favored missions. Bring It On remains a great traversal protect ally card, and you're starting to feel tanky enough that you can often take that hit for them. Drop Fling for Whirlwind ahead of the Prophet battle. You actually have a decent opening move of Volcanic Shell into Long Haul, which kills the Prophet's 3 frontmost minions and clears the path to her for your team. So feel free to go first. You only take 1 damage from exploding red caps now, so don't worry too much if you have to tank an explosion from them. There's a good chance you'll have a big roar opportunity during this fight, given the number of enemies, so look for your moment.
Give up, guns. The shadow will swallow you whole.
With a 5th card slot opened up by town upgrades, Whirlwind finally makes it into your hand full time. You'll also be dropping Takedown for the final card that you acquire, its older brother, Full Steam. Full Steam does better damage, but has worse movement options than Takedown, as the charge on Full Steam, while 5 tiles, is often unwieldy to use. Still, you can always skip the charge if there's not a good angle for it. Considering how much HP enemies in Act 3 have, you're always going to prefer Full Steam's higher base damage to Takedown's movement. If there are missions where Fling feels useless to you, such as the final mission before the bosses, you can technically flex a card like Hibernate or Bulwark or Grisly Force. Hibernate maybe has an edge case for the heal and movement, which maybe makes it the best of these options. Bulwark is basically irrelevant, though, and Grisly Force is so taxing for so little benefit over Full Steam that I don't know why you'd bother. Terror Strike Drum is a phenomenal option on Berserker, as it gives both good movement and some rider damage. If your weapon isn't energized, like on turn 1, this can be a great tool. I will of course mention Oozewhack's Chandelier as a solid option for Berserker. Your kit doesn't have innate synergy with the ooze summons the way Arcanist and Bard's kits do, but your oozes are more likely to survive, since you can take hits for them. Use Bring It On against melee enemies like Rampagers and Revenants to completely wall them out with oozes. The oozes will then turn around and deal 30 damage to them. Even against ranged enemies like Wraiths, you can still take that hit easily enough to let your oozes run rampant. If you're not fond of Oozewhack's meta though, you'll find lots of value in a Lava Rock Opus too, especially pairing it with Roar or a big multi-target second attack on Takedown. I often run 2 Lava Rocks for juicy AoE nukes. Finally, I'll mention the Actuator, which you get from romancing Evelyn. The Actuator allows you to energize yours and potentially an ally's weapon. Most allies don't gain much from this effect, as most of them aren't going to be wielding weapons with incredibly impactful effects. However, the Berserker's weapon usage is so important and potentially impactful in Act 3 that the Actuator can be a pretty valid option. Tusk Charger remains Berserker's staple weapon in Act 3 for you, as it's easy to proc and provides great setup. To my mind, the only weapon that really gives it competition for the Berserker is Bright Break. Bright Break only procs when an adjacent hero defeats a monster, making it far less reliable than Tusk Charger. It also only provides 2 tiles of movement as opposed to 3. However, the attack 3 with Blind is an incredibly potent effect. There are also ways to cheat weapon procs into play, namely the aforementioned Actuator, but also some Fate cards. If you don't mind the investment, Bright Break can be super strong, and finally give the Berserker some of that true crowd control he's been craving. Unlike me here, you should take Berserker's +3 blue Fate card. Town upgrades permitting, make sure you're running 4 blue, 5 black, and 2 red Fate cards. Otherwise, you're looking for extra movement and damage. I usually abandon my Retaliates by now since I'll have better options for black cards. After 15 levels, a +5 health buff from town upgrades, and your 3rd level passive, negating 3 damage every hit, you're finally a real, actual, honest-to-God tank. Unfortunately, a lot of enemies like Revenants and Wraiths compensate by hitting very hard, and you're still taking that first damage each round without any mitigation. So while I definitely encourage you to take hits for your friends, don't deliberately put yourself in lethal situations. Use Tusk Charger or Bright Break or Terror Strike Drum to position at the start of your turn for full steams. As I mentioned when describing the card, you can skip the charge if it's not going to help you do damage. Ideally, you want to be doing full steams basically every round. Otherwise, Fling still works for pits. Bring It On still gets you across the map and can set up some really fun jank with Provoke. And Long Haul and Whirlwind are okay situationally. Share your Lava Rock opuses with allies like Ranger, who needs it for Skull Rattle Shot, or else an ally who could use it for a big spend. You're the best hero to take hits from the Prophet, so don't be afraid to stand near her. She'll tickle you, but won't be buffing other monsters if she does. You still have a bad matchup against the Ogre Queen, but at least you can punch her a lot harder with full steam now. If you're running Bright Break, you can even blind her, which feels great. Deal AoE damage to mushrooms, since they don't hurt you, and look for a good roar if the opportunity presents itself. Your face is a good shield. Don't let your squishy idiot friends get nuked. AoE the extractors if possible, but try not to waste single target attacks on them. Your focus should be the Lich. Your allies have better solutions for the extractors typically, excepting your ultimate, which can really come in clutch. Speaking of your ultimate, your shadow does a sort of combination between it and Whirlwind. It's not too scary, honestly, though it can wipe out a bunch of Ooze-Wax oozes pretty fast if your allies are using those. At the point where shadows are relevant, though, you're near the end of the fight, and you're not relying on ooze damage. They've already done their job. And that's my guide for the Berserker. If you have any questions or thoughts you'd like to share, I'm always happy to chat in the comments below. My next guide will be on the Rogue. Until then, see you out in the Sunderlands.